Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar Weekly Discussion topic video. This one is going to be Bending episode 4, and this one's going to be all about airbending, which means there's just one episode left in this series. I'm going to cover energy bending potentially later this week, if not next week. So yeah, hopefully should be bringing this series on bending to an end fairly shortly. So let's just jump straight into airbending. Iroh explains air as the element of freedom. The air nomads detached themselves from worldly concerns and found peace and freedom. Also, they had pretty good senses of humor. So yeah, air is the element of freedom, and you know it definitely fits the idea of this element, the philosophy of the people. They are pacifist. You know, they tend to stick to themselves, like separate from the rest of the world, away from all these worldly concerns, so they don't have to be involved in all these complexities and stuff like that. But fundamentally, they do like to be free. They want to be away from that stuff, so they're free from it. They can just focus on being peaceful, not needing to be violent, and just being, at one with nature and spirits. And as we'll go through this video, you'll definitely get the sense that it's a more complex element than some of the other ones with regards to the philosophy, in that, most airbenders have a certain level of philosophy, but then a lot of the powers of airbending are almost kind of limited by just how much you do need to detach yourself to actually achieve the ultimate abilities of airbending. But it definitely fits quite well. I'll bring the chakra in fairly early here. Because the philosophy of airbending is a very interesting point. The air chakra, once again, the explanation that I have here is that what makes a bender different than a non-bender is the fact that, for me, obviously a bender's ability is that they can manipulate their chi, their own chi, along their chi paths. And I think an airbender, what makes them unique is that their air chakra point in their body, their pool of chakra, the air one, is special, whether that be because the lion turtle gave someone airbending or they were born as an airbender. There's something essentially special about their air chakra that affects their whole chakra network, and that is what allows them to only manipulate air despite being a bender. So air chakra, located in the heart, deals with love and is blocked by grief. And this is, I suppose, the really interesting thing about airbending. Like, this is what the air chakra deals with. People who, pride themselves on their philosophy of kind of, sticking to themselves, being peaceful, not getting involved in worldly affairs, pretty much doing their best to kind of, doing their best to detach themselves from the world. Yet fundamentally, their kind of chakra, their powers are kind of fundamentally fueled by love and blocked by grief. It's a very interesting one, as we'll get into, with the ability of flight and what that means and that sort of thing, and kind of the teachings of the air nomads and how their culture works, and that, as far as we're aware, like the people in the air nomads, especially early on, in modern day it's different, of course, but they didn't really seem like they had like proper families. Obviously, the men of the air nomads live in the north and south temples, and then the women in the east and west. And it's just people traveling between them, how the new kids are born. It's not like that really families form. It's just kind of, they do it to kind of keep the culture going, and they don't really form close attachments. It doesn't seem like marriage is like that big of a thing in the air nomad culture, if at all. But obviously characters like Aang and Tenzin obviously changed that going forward, and there's more of a focus on that. And then even early air nomad culture seemed to involve family units much more than, I suppose, the air nomads that we primarily know from like Aang's early era and Gyatso and those type of characters. So I suppose that the thing here is just that they talk a lot about this whole idea of not having connections, yet, love is a key thing. And like, I suppose this plays into the whole idea of, Aang's issue as a character was always that he cared too much about the people that he does care about, to the point where he was so attached that he would drop everything to save them if they were in danger at the expense of like everything else. Whereas the air nomads are more like, no, love from the perspective of like love everything. All life is important, from the smallest thing to up to humans and animals and that sort of thing. Love everything, even and so I suppose having grief, which is primarily, caused by being so attached to something that them going away really hurts you, like breaks you, like to the point like it sort of happens with Aang. It rightfully so would be that sort of thing. Like, so I suppose the philosophy of air nomads is to, care about everything, but not to the point where like losing that thing would kind of really, really hurt you. So it's a kind of confusing one to get the balance of being a really strong air nomad. But it's one of those things where like very few air nomads achieve, I suppose, the ultimate form of philosophy. Only characters like Guru Lahima and Zahir to some extent, but even then I wouldn't say Zahir really represents all that much the best philosophy of an air nomad. But we'll get into that later on. Let's quickly move over to I suppose the origins of airbending, and it's a very different story. Like firebending, this one is different. We know this story. The key thing here is that obviously the airline turtle was what gave the air nomads their abilities, but as far as we're aware, the airline turtle allowed the early air nomads to just keep their element, live on the back of the line turtle, but also keep the element. It didn't seem like they had to give it back, because the air nomads made an effort to live at peace with the spirits, which seemed to be the case until they turned to dark spirits. So for them, there was a trust between their line turtle and them, where they were just happy with them having the element and not needing to give it back. So that's very different. It means that like we pretty much don't know who the first like full-on air nomad was, but it gives you this idea as to like, oh, the air nomads were always kind of different in their approach to things. So their idea of, like respecting all life, even spirits, was at play here. The key thing though here is that the element that I suppose airbending would be the animal that airbending is based on is actually twofold. Early air nomads, their airbending was based on the line turtle itself, which is very different because obviously their tattoos were more modeled off the markings on the air line turtle. But then later on, when the line turtles left the human world, it switched to focusing on the sky bison, which I suppose potentially gives us the idea of why there's such a shift in the style of it, in that the early air benders seem to be able to like fly by kind of creating this kind of cloud-like object underneath them, yet that ability basically seems lost in modern day, and it's much more focused on gliding, I suppose, based on the sky bisons. So there's some really interesting stuff happening here, but yes, the sky bison is, for the most part considered the animal that the style of airbending is based upon, because the current air nomad tattoos are, very just very much geometrical arrows rather than the more fancier arrows of the line turtles, and you can see that very much is at play here. The style is focused on the sky bison, how it uses its techniques, the fact that it can really shoot out high pressure air out of its mouth. It can whip its tail down and do that. And then I suppose the most important thing is that, like, without really overly using its like limbs or anything like that, sky bisons can just float. We see that with the baby sky bisons in Korra, that they hit a certain point where like they suddenly discover that they can potentially fly, and they just start floating away almost up into the sky with no control. So it's an inherent airbending ability to like levitate, fly. So very, very cool stuff there, and they're the ones who I suppose stick most clearly to that, because the air nomads live so closely with their sky bison, and they have herds nearby, to the point where it's almost a part of growing up as an air nomad, where you are just given a baby like sky bison of your own to become friends with. which isn't the case with like people in the Earth Kingdom. Badger moles seem to just, for the most part live underground in caves and stuff like that. Not many people have them as pets or even see wild ones around. Dragons, equally so. Like a couple of people had them as pets in the past, Sozin, Roku, but primarily it seemed like they were just hunted and considered wild animals, whereas sky bison just seem to have this very good relationship with airbenders, and hence why their philosophy is such a big part of their element, more so than a lot of the other ones. But I suppose let's from there move into talking about the martial art of airbending. Now, the real world martial art that airbending is based off is Bagua. I suppose it's called the art of circle walking, and this is this is interesting in that it's very clear. You can see this. The way Aang moves when he fights is he never stays still or just moves like forward. He's always kind of, when he moves forward, he kind of moves forward in kind of like arcs. Like the way he moves his feet is to always kind of create kind of like angular momentum to like be ready to deliver a really powerful airbending blow, because it's very much based on generating, spin for tornado stuff, or just generating energy to shoot a blast of gust of wind at someone. So it's a martial art that very much fits what airbending is. You can see the way that they use their like gliders and stuff like that to create stuff like tornadoes and stuff like that. It's very much based around like spinning, twirling, always moving, be the leaf sort of stuff from The Legend of Korra is probably the best example of that. The way Korra just shifted things in that first pro bending match and could dodge so effortlessly, that is the kind of art of airbending, being able to go through those gates by like spinning around them in union with them, as kind of Jinora Ikki demonstrated to Korra. That's what it's all about, really. So yeah, that's one that really fits for airbending. But I suppose let's get into some of the techniques now. Airbending is a weird one in that some of them are very hard to fit into the different categories that I'm kind of using here. In that the ones I've been going for is there's standard airbending, then there is a special technique that high-level benders can use, and that's like the equivalent of metal bending or lightning generation. I think there's a spiritual technique, and then I think there's a bloodline technique that only people who are special and born with the technique can actually use. So let's get into those with airbending. A simple airbending at a base level is, blasting air at people. It's an open palm form, so it's rather than a firebender punching forward and fire coming out, an airbender would like thrust their palm forward to send a gust of air at someone. And then obviously using your own momentum and movement to add energy and speed, of course, to those attacks by flipping, and using your movement effectively is another thing. Airbending is also the element that I think most uses the element to augment your physical traits, and it makes it a very creative element. It's definitely the element that seems like in training for it, a lot of effort is put on being creative with this element. Like Aang, for instance, can use his airbending to basically lower the wind resistance to run faster, but he can then also suddenly stop, and because he's running so fast, he can basically send an air kind of silhouette of himself at someone, which like slams into them and sends them flying. That's really cool. He can obviously jump much higher than other people. With a glider, he can basically glide, effectively fly if he needs to with that. There's obviously a limit on it, of course. But just the amount of stuff you can do. You see moments like when he takes on the drill. He can use his airbending to effectively run down a wall. That's how much control he has over like his speed, his connection to stuff, and so on. It's very powerful. Then Obviously, there seems to be some element of being able to compress air to make yourself kind of, I suppose, increase your lung capacity by compressing air, and like you see that when he tackles bits of the volcano, he does just some crazy airbending air blast out of his mouth. He uses that for the sky bison whistle as well. So just manipulate, augmenting your body and stuff like that is really kind of an essential thing for airbenders, and it makes them very cool. Just all the stuff they can do. Obviously, more powerful techniques involve kind of creating tornadoes by kind of gathering air with like their staff sometimes, or just doing some impressive acrobatics to generate the kind of angular momentum needed to create this stuff like a tornado. But then there's like there's other really creative stuff as well. Like at one point, doesn't Aang create like a kind of air funnel type thing where he just has a mini tornado and he's holding it, and then Sokka puts some rocks in it and it acts like a cannon basically. And there's some very, very impressive stuff. There's more, I suppose, offensive focused airbending where you can basically kind of make air very thin and slice it at something, and it can like actually cut stuff, which is an extremely powerful technique. Avatar state powers, stuff like that, is also impressive, where like they can effectively create gusts of wind powerful enough to like kind of just the wind itself is kind of tearing rock apart. Like there's some very, very impressive stuff. They also have some element of ability to use heat, in that we know that airbender breathing techniques allows them to keep their body warm as well, which is also something that firebenders can do, which I suppose shows that, like Iroh teaching Zuko that technique is also somewhat inspired by airbending, but still some very cool stuff. Like waterbending, like there's a water spout technique where the avatar levitates using a kind of funnel of water. They can also do that with airbending. And then I'll include this here, but I suppose it'll have an asterisk beside it and like a bit of an explanation. But I think the airbending, like sucking out air from people's lungs, asphyxiation technique, is just a normal technique. I don't think there's anything overly special about this. But I suppose it's one of those ones where most airbenders will never use that technique because it is such a violent killing technique that most airbenders like Aang, Tenzin would never use it because they'd have no reason to use it. So it's really one of those ones where, like, because of that, it's hard to say if it's a special technique or it's just that Zahir is the only airbender we've ever seen who is a villain who would actually use a technique like that. So right now I'm just considering it a normal technique. Like, we know airbending can be used in terms of suction as well as just blasting stuff away, so it makes sense that they could suck stuff out of people's lungs by using their technique effectively. But yeah, and then of course, like, let's get into some of the more fun techniques. Part of being an airbender, becoming a master airbender, is that the last stage of your training that you have to complete as an airbender, that earns you your arrow tattoos, is inventing an airbending technique of your own. So Aang invented the air scooter, which is a very cool technique where you just create a ball of air that hovers above the ground and you stand on top of it and you can fly around the place all crazy like. It's really cool. It's like riding on a spinning top. Tenzin kind of, I suppose, enhanced this into a kind of air cycle type technique where it's more of just a kind of wheel of air that he kind of rides on. It's just a more advanced version of the technique. Just like Aang in his older life developed the air scooter to the point where he makes it much bigger and it's more powerful and like easier to control and stuff like that. But yeah, let's get into some of the actually fancy techniques. Let's start with the advanced level airbending technique. I said it was kind of hard to place these into categories, but I'm making my best guess at this. This is definitely the one where I'm the least confident with, but I think the high level airbending technique that most people can learn, but you have to be powerful enough to learn it, is the ability of flight. Now, again, it's another one of those things where, like, the philosophy of airbending and just the people who'd be willing to get this technique, it means that not a lot of people have done it. I don't think there's anything inherently special about the two characters who have used this technique that means that, like, oh, they're special, no one else can do it. Obviously, this is a technique only Guru Lahima and also Zahir have unlocked this technique. The thing with it is that it is the ultimate form of airbending in that you are so detached from the world that you can effectively fly. It's the ability that the airline turtle has. It's the ability that the sky bisons have of just being able to fly without really using your movement, like flapping or having a glider and stuff like that. You were just literally levitating off the ground. That's what those two animals have, and that's just what this ability is. The thing, though, is that to unlock this technique, you have to release yourself from all of your earthly tethers, everything that binds you to the earth. And that means, like, basically, as far as we're aware, not really caring about anything. Like, Zahir only unlocks the technique when Pali, his girlfriend, dies. And then Guru Lahima, obviously, is this kind of seen as this, definitely well-respected guru, but, like, almost, like, taking the ideals of the air nomads to, like, the too high of a degree, not caring about anything, whereas I think most airbenders, like Aang, like Tenzin and his family, do still care about people, and so most airbenders won't unlock this technique because of kind of what you have to do to get to that level. So it's one of those ones where I don't think there's anything like you have to be born with the ability to fly, and that's the only way you can do it. I think anyone could do this, it's just not a lot of people are going to be willing to just let go of everyone and kind of almost be alone, like, to use this technique. It's just one of those ones where, like, you have to sacrifice so much to get it, and then is it really worth it in the end? It's a cool technique, of course. There's nothing I don't think overly flashy about it, in that I suppose that's one of my problems with Book 3 Change, in that this as the big technique that allows Zahir to fight Korra, I thought it was very telling that they had to poison Korra to have the fight be in any way even. It just shows that, like, for a really good airbender, it's a perfect technique. It allows them extra dodging abilities, extra ability to run away from fights and dictate the battle themselves, but all it was him slamming into Korra by flying and knocking her into stuff. Like, there was no, I suppose, amazing offensive power about it. It just allowed him movement to attack her more effectively. But it's definitely a cool technique. I'd like to see another airbender gain this ability at some point, but who knows if we actually will. But yeah, very interesting that a lot of these abilities involve philosophy so much. The spiritual technique of airbending, though, as the most spiritual element, is interesting in that I think we've seen it. I think it's Janora's ability of basically astral projection. She's able to project her spirit out of her body much more easily than any other character who we've seen do it before. Of course, Aang's body was kind of like separated from his spirit by like Heibai and stuff like that. But he didn't really do that on his own, and then any other time we kind of see it happen, it's like these super spiritual events, whereas Janora, yes, she is very spiritual, but as far as we're aware, she just needs kind of, a little bit of space, decent amount of concentration, and she can separate her spirit from her body and have such control over what she does with it. She can phase between like solid objects, go up, down, float and stuff like that. She's not like limited with really where she goes, so it's really impressive what you can do. I suppose that what makes it an airbending technique and not just a spirit technique is that the spirituality is obviously separating the body and the spirit. The airbending side of it, I think, is her ability to kind of phase through things and also to kind of float up and down. Like, it's not like she's tethered to the ground by like gravity or anything like that. She can actually like float essentially as well. So I think that's why the airbending aspect to it is there as well. So Janora demonstrates the airbending spiritual technique very, very clearly, I think, and I think it's a really cool technique. Absolutely, it fits the it being such a spiritual technique. The uses it has, of course, they use it very effectively in the show, but for very spiritual air nomads, it's a very important technique. Then we get to, in my opinion, like if you're keeping track of this like in a table of like, okay, here's the high level technique for each element, here's the spiritual technique for each element, here's the bloodline need to be born with it technique. The only blank spot for me on the table is the bloodline technique for airbending. I don't think we've seen it yet. Some people would argue it's the Zahir's airbending asphyxiation technique, but I don't think it is. I don't think that's a big enough kind of shift from what those techniques are to make it be the case, in that you look at the special techniques for all the other elements, and what is it? It's lava bending. It's a shift from what earth bending is to make it a little bit different. For fire bending, it's combustion bending. It's fire, but it's more focused on like explosions. For water bending, it's psychic water bending, psychic blood bending, the ability to bend without the use of the full moon. It changes the nature of the ability. With airbending, I don't think just sucking air out of people's lungs is enough. I think what it eventually will be, it'll be something to do with sound. A lot of people theorize about this, but I think that's what it kind of has to be. It's airbending, but taken to the next degree. If you shoot out air fast enough, potentially breaking the sound barrier, you can have sonic boom type attacks. We've already seen airbenders use their kind of abilities to kind of augment, like their shouting, blowing bison whistles, and that sort of thing. I think they could definitely do something like that, where they, can influence sound. Like they can just turn on that ability, and they can have sonic booms coming around the place, changing the pitches, damaging people's ears, calling animals in and stuff like that. It's a really cool ability. And another connection I'll make here is that I talked in the last video about firebending, about combustion bending, and it involving the light chakra, which is potentially involving the light chakra, which is located in the forehead for the third eye, which is something Pali and Combustion Man both have. If indeed sound bending is going to be a thing for airbending, I think we have examples in one of the other chakras. The 5th chakra point is called the sound chakra. It's located in the throat. It deals with truth blocked by lies. And I think this could be a really cool thing, that someone born with this technique has something special about their sound chakra, and maybe they can really manipulate the chakra, the chi around their throat, and they can really influence the way they do it. They can bend stuff out of their mouth, like they can really alter their voice to do stuff. They can make really high-pitched screams, like potentially like shatters glass, that really damages eardrums, that sort of thing. They can lower it, and they can call bisons maybe just by themselves. They don't need a bison whistle. They can just make that sound themselves, and then it may be having an impact over their whole kind of chi network by allowing them to do stuff with normal airbending to have it involve sound, like as I'm speculating with sonic booms and that sort of thing, like nails on chalkboards type stuff that just will influence the battle in various different ways. And what it deals with, the dealing with truth blocked by lies. You could very much get this idea that you could almost create this weird situation where like a combustion bender is kind of weak to just their forehead being hit, and they're kind of almost stuck in place when they use their technique. They can't be overly mobile. That a sound bender's weakness would be just that if they ever lie, their technique is like their power is lowered or something like that. Like they can't use their technique until they kind of get past the lie or something like that. That they have to be so truthful in everything they say to keep their power like fully active and stuff like that. I think that would be a cool way to do it. That you tackle a soundbender by forcing them to lie about something, and I think it would work. That way, like obviously 4 of the chakra points have been used already, the 4 elements. The light chakra, I think, very much is used with a combustion bender. The thought chakra, I think that the 7th one, the crown of the head, pure cosmic energy and earthly attachments, I think that is so focused on spirituality and potentially linked to the avatar state full stop, that it doesn't really involve another element as such. But I do think the kind of last chakra point that doesn't seem to be involved with all that much is definitely, potentially the sound chakra. Going further in depth, like it's explained that, like it's more about the lies that you tell yourself. Like when Aang deals with this, it's that he remembers him concealing his true identity from Sokka and Katara initially, not telling them who's the Avatar, and just accepting your true nature. I could definitely see something cool about, like, if we ever do get, like, potentially the first soundbender. But I suppose finishing up with this video, it's not in any way confirmed that soundbending is the ultimate technique. I just assume it is. To me, it's the one that makes the most sense, and I haven't really seen anything that, like, would make me believe it's anything other than that. Like, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't really remember any of the other, like, really obvious theories. The only one I can think of is just potentially, other than that, like compression bending or something like that, where they just double down on the compression of air and have it be more kind of cannon focused. Like they charge up this attack and then send out just this really, really powerful burst of like air that just acts like an air cannon, and it's like this devastating thing, almost like an airbending version of combustion bending, where like it's just like explosions at range. It's just like unspeakably fast, air blast. But I suppose at that stage you're getting so quick that you might as well just do sound bending and sonic booms and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm pretty much just gonna end it there. Airbending is definitely one I think it still is I think the element that they need to go into in the most depth, because it's the one where I think there's still a few things we don't know about just yet. I'd like us to get to a reveal on what the bloodline technique is. The problem, though, is that as much as I'm putting all these categories into place, that like, oh, each bending form has a spiritual technique, a high level technique, and a bloodline technique, I don't know if the show creators are aware that they've kind of created this kind of table of power structures and stuff like that, and they're aware that there's a blank spot with airbending. I'm not sure if that's something that they're even in any way thinking about, or if it's just something that the fans are thinking of. So that's sort of where the problems come in, and that, like, are they even aware that maybe they think airbending already has its special technique? We're not sure. But yeah, that's been the video. Next week I'll do, well, next time, it could be later on this week, depends on what other videos I need to do. I'll do energy bending. Energy bending is going to be different in that there's not that much information out there about the specifics of it, so it's going to be more speculation, but it's probably going to be one of the more interesting videos in this series. So definitely keep an eye out for that video when it does come out. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this airbending video. Also, continue to recommend future discussion topics for this series. But other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.